Welcome, viewers. Today we explore a single chilling moment. One step that broke a grand republic. This river divided strict law from absolute treason. Crossing it meant the end of Roman freedom. Caesar stood at this edge, stripped of his vast military power. He had to choose to yield or stand and fight. With one deep breath, he ordered loyal legions to march on. The dice were cast, and the world changed forever. Let us dive into the mind of this brilliant ancient tyrant. We will discover ambition's dark price. Ancient records claim he spent 10 brutal years in distant Gaul. He conquered wild tribes and built immense wealth. His soldiers loved him deeply and followed every command. They fought through thick mud to build his great glory. The Senate in the capital grew very deeply afraid. His vast influence threatened old traditions. Pompey the Great, his ancient friend, now stood firmly against him. The politicians sought to strip his command. They sent a harsh letter demanding he disband his army. Returning alone meant a biased trial. For a proud Roman general, exile was worse than simple death. His entire legacy was on the line. He gathered trusted officers in the cold winter camp. The firelight reflected anxious faces. Caesar explained the terrible trap set by the Grand Senate. He told them that peace would only bring ruin. Loyal men of the 13th Legion struck their heavy shields. They swore to protect their beloved leader. They packed their gear quietly and prepared for a secret march. The winter wind howled through the dark pine trees. No one knew the terrible storm they were about to unleash. The soldiers simply trusted his brilliant mind. Historians note Caesar remained deeply silent that night. The heavy burden of war pressed on his soul. He rode his horse slowly toward the southern provincial border. The mist was thick and the air was freezing cold. The Roman Republic had strict rules against standing armies. No general could enter with armed troops. This sacred boundary was marked by the narrow Rubicon. It was a small stream with massive meaning. Breaking this law was the ultimate act of deadly treason. The punishment would be swift and merciless. When he reached the muddy banks, he stopped his horse suddenly. The dark water flowed quietly under the moon. He stared at the other side for a very long time. He knew that crossing meant rivers of crimson stains. His officers waited nervously behind him in shadows. The silence of the night was incredibly heavy. Ancient myths claim a giant spirit appeared, playing a flute. It grabbed a trumpet and blew a battle charge. Whether magic or mere courage, Caesar finally made his choice. He turned to his men with a fierce, burning look. He declared that the die was cast, and the deadly game started. There was absolutely no turning back from this. He spurred his horse forward into the freezing, shallow water. The heavy hooves splashed loudly in the dark mist. The entire legion followed him with their weapons raised high. The quiet river was suddenly filled with men. They marched onto the forbidden soil of their own homeland. The Republic was now completely shattered. News of the crossing traveled faster than expected. Desperate riders raced toward the capital. When the Senate heard the dire news, absolute panic erupted. The old men realized their fatal mistake. Pompey the Great tried to gather a defensive force quickly, but the city was totally unprepared. Citizens packed their belongings and fled to the countryside. They feared a massive wave of devastation. Caesar was moving south with terrifying speed and purpose. Town after town surrendered without a fight. His reputation for mercy won over the commanders. They gladly opened their gates to the general. Pompey realized he could not defend the great city of Rome. He made a shocking choice: to abandon it. He ordered loyal senators to flee to the eastern ports, They would build an army in Greece to fight back. The mighty Roman Republic was a government in exile. The streets of Rome were left completely empty. When Caesar finally arrived, there was no army to fight him. He walked into the city, a conqueror. He broke down the heavy doors of the sacred state treasury. He took all the gold to fund his civil war. He declared himself the sole protector of the Roman people. But true peace was still a very distant dream. He knew he had to destroy Pompey to secure his new power. He quickly ordered ships to be built for war. The chase across the Grand Ocean had now officially begun. The two great generals were now bitter foes. Caesar faced storms and starvation to cross the dangerous ocean. He landed in Greece with a much smaller force. Pompey had gathered a massive force of elite soldiers ready. He thought he could crush the tired invaders. They danced around each other for months in a deadly tactic. Both sides built massive trenches and wooden walls. Caesar suffered a harsh defeat at the walls of Dyrrhachium. His starving men were almost pushed into the sea, but Pompey hesitated and failed to finish the bitter job. He let his greatest rival flee to mountains. The two huge armies finally met on the plains of Pharsalus. The burning summer sun beat down on armor. Pompey had twice as many men and a massive cavalry force. The arrogant senators demanded victory. Caesar knew his tired men were vastly outnumbered on that day. He relied on discipline and brilliant tactics. He hid a special line of fierce veterans behind infantry. They were ordered to strike at the enemy horse. The battle began with a clash of iron and shattered wooden shields. The cries of fallen men echoed across the plain. Pompey's heavy cavalry charged hard to break the weaker right flank. They expected an easy and glorious win. But Caesar's hidden veterans leapt forward with their deadly spears. They aimed directly at the faces of riders. The rich riders panicked and fled from the devastating assault. The entire flank of Pompey's huge army collapsed. Caesar ordered his main line to push forward with absolute force. The desperate Republican army shattered. Pompey watched his mighty force crumble in absolute terror now. He turned his horse and fled back to his private camp. If you stood at that river with your own precious life on the line, would you obey the law or take the royal throne? Think about the heavy price of starting a brutal civil war. Tell us your honest thoughts in the comments below. The victory at Pharsalus was absolute and deeply crushing. Thousands of Romans perished in the thick, dark mud. Caesar wept when he saw the bodies of his fallen countrymen. He pardoned many captured rivals who fought him. Among those forgiven was a young man named Marcus Brutus. Caesar treated him like a deeply beloved son. Pompey escaped to Egypt, hoping to find a safe sanctuary. But the Egyptian king had a cruel, dark plan. When Pompey stepped onto the small boat, he met a tragic end. The great general was silenced by assassins. Caesar arrived in Egypt shortly after the tragic betrayal. He was handed the remains of his greatest foe. He did not celebrate, but cried openly for his ancient friend. He punished the wicked killers without mercy. After securing Egypt, he finally returned home to Rome. He was welcomed as an undisputed, mighty king. The Senate declared him the absolute dictator for his life. All real power was concentrated in his hands. He wore the purple toga of ancient kings with a deep, grand pride. He sat on a golden throne in the Senate hall. He reformed the calendar and passed many popular new state laws. The common citizens loved his brilliant leadership. But the old leaders hated his vast, unchecked authority. They whispered in the dark corners of the grand city. Cassius Longinus gathered angry conspirators. They believed they must stop him to protect their freedom. They convinced Brutus to join their dangerous, secret, dark plot. Brutus felt deeply torn between loyalty and duty. They agreed to strike on the dangerous and fatal Ides of March. They hid sharp silver daggers beneath their white togas. Rumors of the deadly dark plot swirled around the city. His wife begged him to stay home on that fateful day. But Caesar's immense pride blinded him to the rapid growing threat. He believed no one would dare to ever strike him down. He walked confidently into the grand theater of Pompey. The senators stood up to greet him with fake respect. They crowded around his golden chair, with hidden weapons drawn. Suddenly, a senator grabbed his purple royal robe. The first blade struck him deeply in the neck from behind. Caesar fought back wildly against his sudden attackers. Crimson stains covered the cold marble floor of the ancient Senate. He was surrounded by a wall of flashing daggers. Then he saw Brutus stepping forward with a raised weapon. The ultimate betrayal shattered his soul to pieces. He pulled his toga over his face and stopped fighting them all. He fell at the base of Pompey's shadowy, tall statue. The great dictator met a tragic end, struck 23 bitter times. The assassins ran outside, screaming of returned freedom, but their violent action did not restore the old republic. It only plunged the world into another brutal war. The people of Rome were deeply furious at the tragedy. They burned the city and hunted down the conspirators. Out of the brutal chaos, a new Roman Empire would arise. Caesar's adopted heir would become the first emperor. The choice at the Rubicon River changed history forever. It proved that absolute power demands a heavy price. His name became synonymous with mighty power and kings. Even today, we remember the man who rolled the dice. The shadow of his ambition still covers the modern era. It is a timeless lesson in power and tragedy. Historians still debate his true legacy and motives now. Was he driven by greed or trying to save his country? The Republic was already rotting from deep corruption. Perhaps a dictator was the only way to restore rules. But the cost of that dark order was endless suffering. A reminder that violence only breeds more devastation. The weapons of the legions forged the shape of modern Europe. The Latin words he spoke still echo in our courts today. From the muddy banks of Gaul to the marble halls of ancient Rome, his journey is the ultimate story of ambition. Every leader since studied his brilliant tactical mind. Every tyrant has feared the hidden weapons in the dark. The tragedy of Julius Caesar is a mirror for us. It asks what we would sacrifice for total, absolute rule. The mist still rolls over the small river in northern Italy. The silent water hides the heavy secrets of the past. The dice were cast thousands of years ago in the bitter cold. Humanity has been playing the deadly game ever since. The stains on the Senate floor were barely dry that dark day. The proud assassins marched through the silent city of ashes. They held their flashing daggers high and shouted for freedom. But the common citizens locked their doors in very deep fear. The people of Rome truly loved their fallen grand dictator. He had given them food, land, and a sense of awesome, great pride. Marcus Antonius, his general, stepped into the light. He carried the broken body into the mighty forum. He delivered a passionate and weeping funeral speech. He showed the crowd the 23 devastating fatal wounds. The crying crowd suddenly turned into a violent, angry mob. They grabbed burning torches to hunt down the cowardly killers. Brutus and Cassius were forced to flee the burning city. Their grand dream of a republic quickly turned into ashes. Caesar's final will held a very shocking revelation. He adopted young Octavian as his only true heir. This boy would inherit the vast wealth and absolute loyalty. He would soon become the mighty Emperor Augustus. At first, Caesar's ghost demanded absolute, swift revenge. Octavian and Antonius marched out for the killers. The two massive armies collided at Philippi in Greece. The final defenders of the old republic were crushed. Cassius and Brutus chose to end their tragic existence. They realized too late they struck down a beloved ancient god. The Roman Republic officially died on that battlefield. The long era of the mighty Roman emperors began. Looking back at the freezing waters of the Rubicon River, we see the terrifying weight of one human action. If Caesar had obeyed the law and returned as citizen, he would face judgment and be forgotten by all history. By choosing to cross, he saved his own epic pride and his life. But he condemned his nation to endless decades of dark war. This is the eternal paradox of mighty martial power. To save a corrupted state, one must often destroy it all. Ancient writers claimed the Republic was already failing fast. It was rotting from greed and political corruption. The rich senators completely ignored the starving poor masses. They only cared about their own immense wealth and vast land. Caesar understood that the old system could not survive long. He used his sword to cut out the deep political cancer. He centralized all authority to force necessary changes. He built grand temples, new roads, and reformed the old laws. But a government built entirely on one single man is weak. It relies completely on his own personal heartbeat. When that heart stopped beating in the ancient Senate chamber hall, the entire foundation of the known world violently shook. Today, the word Caesar is synonymous with absolute grand rule. The German Kaiser and Russian Tsar come from his great name. His face was the very first to be printed on Roman gold coins. He made himself a living god to the common people. Every modern tyrant studies his brilliant rise to power. They learn to control the masses with incredible dark charm. They also learn to fiercely fear the hidden shadows in the room. The absolute power always brings a deadly, hidden threat. The famous Rubicon crossing is now a global metaphor. It means passing a fatal point of no returning back. Every great leader faces their own personal Rubicon, a moment where the heavy dice must finally be thrown. The Roman legions marched through the dark winter forests. They carried the heavy weight of a changing civilization. Their iron boots crushed the democratic traditions to dust, but they also paved the grand way for a united empire. The famous Pax Romana, a time of imperial peace. It was purchased with the sacred essence of Julius Caesar. We must ask ourselves if the violent ends justify the dark means. Can a brutal tyranny ever lead to a better world? The ancient marble statues cannot answer these heavy questions. They only stare forward with cold and empty, blind white eyes. But the lessons of his life remain incredibly relevant. The fragile nature of a republic is easily shattered. When the citizens lose faith in their own chosen democratic leaders, they eagerly follow a charismatic, mighty king. Caesar did not destroy the republic entirely by himself. He merely pushed a decaying building until it fell. His legendary story is a severe warning to modern states, a warning to protect the balance of fragile public power. As we stand on the muddy banks of history's great, epic river, we watch the ghostly legions march endlessly in the fog. We hear the distant clash of heavy iron, Roman shadowy shields. We feel the terrifying chill of an approaching war. The ghost of Julius Caesar still walks among our modern cities. His ambition whispers in the halls of unseeing power. He remains history's most fascinating and complex figure. A brilliant scholar, a ruthless warrior, and a tragic king. He gambled his entire epic life on one single martial march, and in doing so, he managed to conquer eternal time. The memory of his great deeds will never completely ever fade. His triumphs and mistakes are permanently carved in stone. As the fog finally clears over the freezing, shallow, dark water, the true scale of his grand historical gamble is revealed. We are all living in the shadow of his massive grand empire. The world as we know it was born from his very sharp sword. The ancient dice have stopped rolling on the cold, crimson floor. But the game of supreme power will never truly, ever finish. He broke a corrupt system, but birthed a brutal, mighty empire. Was he a savior, or a dark tyrant crushing freedom? History judges the victors, but the heavy sorrow remains. Share your thoughts on his legacy in the comments right below.
If you enjoyed this journey, please like, share, and subscribe to us. Join our channel next time for much more epic